Hey.
How are you?
I'm awesome.
I think I'm awesome too. I'm so excited because today is Ask Us Anything.
Nice.
It's like a party of a podcast.
It is like a party in a box.
This is a series of questions that come in through our training camp.
Yeah, if you join Base Camp for free.
For free, no less.
You have access to Ask Us Anything and all of our podcasts and a bunch of other cool stuff. So you can ask, and then that gets on this episode of the podcast.
So we have some fun questions, some deep questions, some good questions, and we got a lot of them. So we'll try to spend a few minutes on each to make sure we get everybody's question answered.
Yeah, the hard thing is a lot of questions, you could spend like a long time answering.
All right, our first question is a really good question. Actually, a variety of people have asked us this, not just in Ask Us Anything, but when we're out and about. When we're thinking about listening for organization, how do we actually do that? What are the kind of tips and tricks we can offer for that?
Yeah, so George is talking about not organization like companies, but organization in the mental model sense. So a mental model is equal to how we organize information, meaning when we organize information, we make meaning or mental models. So M equals I-O. Mm-hmm. And so what we want to do is listen not just for the I, but listen for the O, because the O is determining the meaning of the I.
Yes.
I is information. O is the way it's organized. Mm-hmm. DSRP is the way we organize the information. So knowing DSRP gives us the language to understand and talk about the O and listen for it.
Yeah. So
that's the first part, is just having that language, the language of DSRP. And the understanding and awareness of DSRP helps you to listen for O. Right.
So, for example, when you're talking, I can listen for places where you're distinguishing between one thing and another. Yes. In the way you're saying it, I can listen for when you're saying, even gesturing, well, this is connected to that.
Yes.
And I'm listening. I'm hearing the structure of what you're saying, which is that you're relating two ideas.
And not just listening with your ears, but listening with your whole body as a sail, as we say. And like you said, I'm making gestures sometimes when I'm talking, or I'm bobbing my head left and right. And that might be an indication of, it could be this choice, or I could make that choice. Oh, I'm making a distinction of choice. Mm-hmm. I've got two choices. Mm-hmm. So we're listening for that. And when we listen for that, and then as we are utilizing DSRP structure, you can say, well, maybe you have more than two choices, for example. Maybe your mental model is that you only have two choices. That's this or that. But what if it's this and that? Mm-hmm. Or what if it's this or that or this other thing? Right? And so you can help people by listening deeply to what they're stuck in. They might be stuck in, I either have to do this or I have to do that. Mm-hmm. Well, that's really interesting, right? There's a relationship there, and we can challenge the distinction of that relationship of or to possibly be both and. And we can say maybe there's more than just two. Maybe it's not either or. We can explore those kinds of things, the kind of structural or organizational things. The other piece there is that what we call the synonyms lists, or the root lists.
Yes.
And we have a synonyms or root list for D and S and R and P. Mm-hmm. And learning those terms will help you hear the organization and the way that people describe things. I often say that the words we use are like billboards to our mental model. So they give us indication. They're indications of what the deeper mental model is.
Yes.
So if we pay attention to the words we use and the intonation and the emphasis that we use, a lot of times we can see the distinctions. We can see perspective. For example, I use the word see.
Yeah.
Well, see is almost obvious and always reference to a perspective.
Right.
So when we're using visual type language, we're talking about perspectives. We're using metaphors for perspective.
Okay, so then that means that there were a few parts to the answer. One is listen with everything, not just your ears. Two is not go beyond the information and listen for those synonyms of things like connect or the way I see it is an indication somebody's taking your perspective. and things like that.
Yeah, and then there's also just the parts of speech, right? Like the speech can communicate the verbs. A lot of the verbs are relationships, and all the nouns are definitely identities. Distinctions. The identity part of a distinction, which means that you have an other that is possible.
Right.
And all of the nouns can be systems that maybe have parts that you're not recognizing. You're talking about the whole, but you're not talking about the parts. Or you're talking about the parts, but you're not referencing the whole. So I go, well, what's going on there?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Or you're referencing the point, but not the view. So your language might include one of the structures, but not the other structure, the opposing element.
Right.
And so you can use that to really deeply listen and understand not only what the person's saying and where the person is, but where they're not.
Yes.
And where they could be.
Yes.
And that's a big part of coaching. Listening is the crux of all coaching, listening. Coaching, therapy, relationships,
human connection.
Yeah. It's being good at the listening and listening for meaning rather than listening sort of like a lawyer for catching people in words.
Yeah.
Information. But listening for the O instead of the I, not instead of the I, but alongside the I is critical.
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of ways, but at the end of the day, it's practicing those things, getting good at it.
Well, and I just think just reminding yourself to listen for the mental model, not just hear the information that's coming across to you, but like, what does Derek really mean by that?
Yeah.
Use the word mean. Like, what does he mean by that?
Yeah.
What are the things he's doing? What is he connecting and those kinds of things?
So I'll give you just one quick example. I just said at the end of the day, it's practicing. So that's me kind of collecting all the things we just said into a whole.
Yeah.
And then making an arrow of practice to have the effect. So all the stuff we talked about will be useless. Essentially what I was saying is all the stuff we just talked about will be useless if you don't practice relationships. So this whole system of the answer we just said will be useless if you don't practice to have the effect that you're looking at. Yeah. So that's the compression.
Yeah, interesting.
Right.
Can one say that a mental model without any bias is reality itself?
Yes.
There you go. There's your answer.
Yeah, it's hard to come by. George Box was fond of saying all models are wrong, but some are useful. So all of our mental models are wrong. That's so important to understand that all of our mental models are wrong. It gives us tremendous humility and understanding that, we're all trying to be right all the time instead of just acknowledging that we're all wrong all the time.
Right.
We're wrong because we're biased. We're only seeing a tiny sliver of the reality. In many cases, we don't need to see the whole reality in order to have something be effective. We can see just some level portion of it. So, bias isn't just coming from the perspective that we're coming from. It's coming from the distinctions that we're making. The level of part whole that we're deciding on is important. And so if we fully DSRP'd, first of all, it would be just too huge. We would be describing the whole universe.
Right.
At some point, we have to make decisions about what we're going to include and what we're not going to include for the given situation.
Yeah.
So bias is always there, but we can reduce bias by taking into account a few extra things in a given situation. We can reduce the bias that's going to affect us in that situation.
So you can reduce it, but you can't completely eradicate it.
No, you can't eradicate bias because you'd have to. The only way to truly capture all of reality is to explain it all, which we can't.
Yeah.
Can't do.
Well, that was the next question, which was a follow-up from Ronaldo, which is there a formal way to actually guarantee that a mental model has no bias?
Guarantee, no. But mitigate, sure, absolutely. You can take more than one perspective. Yeah. For example, Leonardo da Vinci was fond of saying whenever you look at something, in his case, he was talking about the dissection of organs. Mm-hmm. And he would draw the heart, or he did these amazing drawings of the heart or the lungs or whatever. And he would say you have to cut it from 3 different angles. Mm-hmm. Well, that's mitigating bias. Would his understanding of the organ increase if he cut it from 20,000 angles? Sure. But would it increase enough to make a difference? Probably not. So 3 is a good rule, right? Looking at something from 3 angles. And we see the same thing in when you're in the mountains and you're doing map and compass. We call it triangulation.
Yeah.
In order to find where you are. One azimuth or one sort of line from a mountaintop to where you are is not enough to really determine where you are accurately.
Yeah.
But 3 is a pretty good rule of thumb, right? But if you took 30, you would be even more accurate. But you would take more time to get that. And you wouldn't benefit that much from knowing that you're, 2 feet to the right rather than, 2 feet to the left. So as an example, 3 perspectives is substantially better than 1 perspective.
In terms of bias. Yeah.
But is 50 perspectives worth the time? Maybe not. Is 3 perspectives from 3 different types of people better than 3 perspectives from the same type of person? Sure.
Yeah.
Because you're getting like you're not coming at from the same angle.
Yeah. It sounds like one of the things that we talk a lot about in class that relates to it sounds like one of the ways to really reduce the possibility of bias in your mental models is to almost interrogate them with DSRMP.
Absolutely.
Challenge, are the distinctions I'm making clear, right? Have I got enough or all of the ones that matter in this space that I'm thinking about? And then also, obviously, just checking, are the things that need to be related, are they related?
Yeah.
Are you taking enough perspectives, all of
Yeah, if you follow what we call the DSRP 483 protocol, which is kind of the steps, which is on training camp, like that will mitigate
a lot. Okay.
And probably enough.
There you have it. Nice.
Unless you're, really trying to do something at the most extreme and refined level, that's going to get it like 90% of the time.
Can you explain what is meant by validated by research? And he gives a reference. He saw a podcast that had an ad in the middle of it for AG1 supplements and said exactly that it was validated by research. And he's wondering about the difference between validated by research, empirical, science-based, all of those terms. Like, how do we, what do they actually mean?
Yeah, I mean, we could do 200 podcast episodes on this answer. So, this is really important. It's also a little technical, but at the end of the day, it doesn't have to be super difficult.